Check 1 2 3. Check 1 2 3. Hey, what's going on, guys? This is Kevin Zwicker from Fast Count, and this is your 2026 WWE Elimination Chamber post show. We are steadfast on the road to WrestleMania, and after tonight, the vision as to where we are going to get and what the card is going to look like has become a bit clearer. For the most part, for a good section of this show, it really felt like things were pretty paint by numbers. It felt like you knew that who was going to win, and the results weren't really shocking. But then when we got to the main event, things really started to shake things up, and now it looks like things are going into a direction that before this night probably didn't look like we were going to get there, and now things have kind of shaken itself up a little bit. But guys, please, before we get into the show, please remember to hit that like button and subscribe. We had debuts, we had returns, we had people punching their tickets to WrestleMania, everything that you would want to see coming out of this show. And one of the main takeaways for me, outside of that hellacious LA Knight botch, which, oh my God, if you think that this guy was being thrown into the gulag by Triple H before, this guy may never see the light of day ever again after what went down. But when you look at the current roster of the WWE, right, when it comes to the women's division and the men's division, there's something that is pretty noticeable, at least to me, and that is the lack of youth and the lack of emerging names that are coming up to replace the established names that we already have, right? You look at the women's division, you know who runs that, right? Rhea, Charlotte Flair, Becky Lynch, Io. These are some names that have been established for a minute. And you don't really necessarily know who is going to be the individuals who are going to be taking up the mantle past those people, right? And after tonight, with the performance that we saw from Raquel Rodriguez, the way that she was able to dominate in the Elimination Chamber, the way that, Kiana James was able to do her thing as well, somebody who I think that has been gaining a lot of attention over the last several weeks. Obviously, she's a very pretty face, but after tonight, she has shown that she's able to do a little bit more in the ring that probably most people might have expected, especially people who aren't necessarily familiar with NXT and only have been exposed to her for the main roster. I think that we're starting to get the names and starting to develop a new crop of who is going to take over once those established names start to fall back a little bit. But let's start from the end, right? Because I think that all of the talking points that are the most interesting coming out of this show are going to come from the end, right? We saw Drew McIntyre get involved in the Elimination Chamber after we saw the Masked Man deliver a stomp to Logan Paul, who's having himself a dominant performance in the Elimination Chamber as well. And it was revealed that at least this Masked Man happens to be none other than the architect, the revolutionary, the visionary Seth freaking Rollins. Now, with the vision being in disarray, with guys like Bronson Reed and Braun Breaker out for the foreseeable future, I don't necessarily know if by the time WrestleMania comes around that Seth Rollins is going to be 100% clear. But I think with the fact that they involved him on the show tonight, they pretty much have said, at least in my mind, that it's probably more likely than not that he is going to be healed up for WrestleMania. And I think if there was no injuries involved, I think that the go-to matches, pretty clearly would be Seth Rollins versus Braun Breaker. But with the reports coming out that Braun Breaker and Seth Rollins are working their asses off to be cleared for WrestleMania time, and with us not seeing Braun Breaker yet, I don't necessarily know if that's going to be in the cards, right? But Drew McIntyre, he gets himself involved in the main event Elimination Chamber match. He's teeing off on Cody Rhodes. He gets RKO'd by Randy Orton. Then, at a drop of a dime, he RKOs Cody Rhodes as well, punches his ticket to WrestleMania. And after the show, where we saw a very interesting stare down between Cody Rhodes and Randy Orton, right? The mentor and the mentee. We got it announced later on, I believe it was in the Elimination Chamber post show, that we were going to get Drew McIntyre versus Cody Rhodes for the title on Friday. Now, this leads to multiple different scenarios being played out. One of the scenarios involved Drew McIntyre enjoying his WrestleMania in the catering section, but I think that more than likely what this is going to do is it's going to initiate us getting a multi-man match for the WWE title. And with that being said, and with that being a pretty big possibility, that kind of, at least in my mind, makes the Elimination Chamber pointless. Because they've always kind of painted the picture that the Elimination Chamber is pretty much your last chance to punch your way into a title match at WrestleMania. And with that being the portrait that is being, painted in front of our very eyes, if you got guys like Jacob Fatu, who has been involved in the storyline, Drew McIntyre, now Randy Orton and Cody Rhodes, it's just like, what is the whole point of us getting involved in these qualifying matches and painting that pictures if there's another scenario for us to insert people into these WrestleMania matches? A little bit pointless to me, but hey, WWE doesn't like it when you ask questions. The boss has said it himself. Don't view the show as a critic and just enjoy the show. And I guess I'm not going to use my critical thinking when it comes to trying to rationalize the show. Right? CM Punk, Finn Balor, two guys that going into this match, I think that it was pretty predictable as to who was going to win. Right? I don't think anybody, I don't even think Finn Balor's own mother predicted that he was going to win this match. But I think that these two guys were able to go out there and put on a really solid match. Finn Balor is somebody who, for years, many people online have complained about him being underutilized. CM Punk, at this stage of his career, is kind of hit or miss in the ring, at least for me. I think that, and I've said this on multiple different occasions, what he has lost in his athletic ability, he has been able to mask with his storytelling ability. But these guys were able to go out there, have a really solid match. They ended up, having Finn Balor take the L cleanly. They shook hands afterwards. And now we're on our way to WrestleMania, CM Punk, Roman Reigns, which leaves a really interesting predicament for me, right? This is a matchup that I think that if we're not going to have guys like The Rock or Steve Austin involved, I think this is the biggest match that WWE can currently do, right? With the crop of talent that they have. But what it does to me is, and I think going out of this, coming out of WrestleMania, I think Roman Reigns is going to be the guy who's going to win. And what that does is you're going to have a guy in Roman Reigns who isn't around that often, right? And as the champion, we're not going to see the title for very many occasions. So with the product already kind of being in a shaky state as it is, you're taking away the title. And there's going to be a lot of times, the several weeks in between where we don't see Roman Reigns, that there's going to be a lot of meaningless shit taking place on the show. And for a product that is already, getting complaints from many people about, how the road to WrestleMania is playing out, I don't necessarily see that as a good thing. Now, CM Punk beating Roman Reigns, I don't think that's going to happen. I think that Roman Reigns has been pretty adamant and pretty open about, his not, being too satisfied with the creative that he was handed. The stuff with the Vision, I think that was something that he wasn't necessarily a fan of. And if you really take a step back and look at that, it was a lot of meaningless stuff taking place. And I think Roman Reigns has pretty clearly stated that he is going back to taking the reins, no pun intended. And I think Roman's going to come out of that show with the title, and that's going to lead to a lot of bad TV with the title not being involved. Rhea Ripley winning the Women's Elimination Chamber match. I don't think that was something that many people were shocked by. It's leading us to a very interesting matchup, right? Rhea Ripley, Jade Cargill. Rhea Ripley, clearly the most popular women's superstar on the roster. She's in discussion for probably top 3 most popular superstars on the roster, period, going up against Jade Cargill, who look at Jade Cargill, action figure come to real life. I think that when you look at the pecking order of the women, I think that Jade is clearly somebody who has been able to really make her mark in the women's division, especially on the SmackDown side. And I think that this is the biggest matchup that WWE can do when it comes to the women that we haven't seen before, not including somebody like AJ Lee. It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. Now, do I think that these two women are going to go out there and be confused for Brett and Sean when it comes to in-ring work? No, but it's going to be interesting to see who comes out of that title match because, like I said, Rhea Ripley has already established herself as probably the biggest women's superstar on the roster. And Jade, who is clearly held in high regard by WWE and fans alike. I think if we're just my logic would be that you would have Jade win that match. Don't think that that's necessarily the direction that they're going to go with, but I think that from a star building perspective, I think that Jade should be the one coming out of that title match as the victor. But we'll see what's going on. One of the major talking points heading into this show was the crate, right? Who's going to be in it? I think that when we first initially saw the crate angle, we all kind of thought it was going to be Chris Jericho. And then we got the report coming out of, from the dirt sheets that AEW has actually frozen Chris Jericho's contract. And that kind of made it to where people turned their attention to Danhausen. And my whole thought process was, okay, what is the point? You're obviously hyping up this box for it to be a big deal. You're doing it to garner attention. You're doing it to have people, wanting to tune into the show to see, what's in the box, right? And if the reveal is going to be Danhausen, who, in my mind, is probably a cheaper, younger, whiter R-Truth. What is the point? This is the road to WrestleMania. This is where we are at the most exciting part of the show, when it comes to WWE's on-screen product and heading into WrestleMania. So for me, it's like every single minute, maybe even every single second, on these shows should be about gearing towards WrestleMania and everything having a bit meaning behind it. And we use some of that time to be revealed that it is Danhausen. Now, the initial reveal was funny because you had kind of these dancers with the they open Nick Aldis and Adam Pearce open up the crate. And we see these dancers like come out the crate in the Danhausen makeup, and it's revealed that it's Danhausen. And initially he got some cheers, and then he got some boos. And it's just funny because, like I said, if we just do this in reverse, and let's say AEW was running, on the road to All In, was running this angle of a crate, and then on one of the big, themed dynamites that they had leading into the show, that they revealed that it's R-Truth in the crate, people would be like, "Hey, what the fuck?" Because that would be a terrible idea. So for WWE to try to hype this thing up and get some intrigue for a guy who is probably there to take over for R-Truth, because I'm assuming that his deal is cheaper than Ron's. It's just like what are we doing here? But what I think is going to go down now with it being announced that we're going to get Cody Rhodes versus Drew for the title on SmackDown, I think there's a very, very distinct possibility that we see Cody Rhodes take that title from Drew. And heading into that could potentially spin off, especially with the look that we saw between the two guys after Randy won. We get Cody versus Randy, right? A match that people have been talking about for a while, a match that people have been opining for a minute, And it's the biggest non-Rock or Roman match that Cody Rhodes could possibly have. And I think that's a really strong, especially if they promote it right, a really strong night one main event. If they decide not to go with the women. And you still got the thing with Drew and Fatu. And I think that we could possibly see, Fatu get involved with that match and screw Drew after Drew has screwed him. So we got the possibility of the multi-man match. But like I said earlier, if we go in the direction of the multi-man match, it basically makes the Elimination Chamber pointless. So I think that we're probably heading towards Randy versus Cody. And if that's the match, I'm cool with it because it's interesting, right? Because you've got two guys who have an extended history of being champions. Cody Rhodes more recently, and Randy Orton seeking title number 15. And for me, just looking at the two guys as champions, it's kind of been there, done that. But I think I'd rather have Randy win that match because we haven't seen him as champion in a very long time. So it's something that I would rather see that because it's a bit more fresher since we haven't seen it in a while. We've seen Cody Rhodes have these pretty decent sized runs for a while. And it's interesting now with Seth being back because we don't 100% know his status for WrestleMania. I'm assuming with them bringing him on TV, that means that they probably know that there's a really good chance that he is going to be cleared for WrestleMania or he's cleared now. But with Braun Breaker out, it looks as if we're probably going to run him and Logan Paul again, which we've seen in the past. And it's fine with me because it's kind of like you have to wrap up this Rollins versus the Vision story. And with Logan kind of being the only healthy body, you just got to do what you got to do. And match-wise, those two guys were able to put on quality matches in the past. And with Logan being full-time for the most part on a weekly basis, he's only improved. So I think match-wise, we're heading in for a pretty good direction. Like I said, but in the men's elimination chamber match, something that really kind of sticked out of my mind, right? A lot of people give Jey Uso a really hard time for not being the best in-ring wrestler, me included, right? For me, it's like, okay, I'm smart enough to separate my own personal likes and what works, right? And with Jey Uso, it's abundantly clear by his merch sales, crowd reaction to what he does, that the guy has gotten over, the guy has gotten successful, and that's all that it matters, in wrestling is getting over, right? But I think even the most hardened Jey Uso fans can admit that nobody's ever going to confuse him for freaking Bret Hart in that ring, right? But I don't think even Jey Uso, who has had many memorable botches in his career, has botched as badly as LA Knight did tonight. That was horrendous. I don't know what happened there. Maybe the guy slipped. Maybe he miscalculated. But my God, you think about his career, right, in the WWE. And sorry. And he's consistently gotten good reactions. We saw a fever pitch of LA Knight support heading into that Saudi Arabia show where he challenged Roman Reigns for the title. And it felt like if we were ever going to get LA Knight as the champion, it was going to be that time because he was so red hot. And it was like really kind of undeniable that this is the guy who the people have kind of chosen. And after that match where he lost, it has been steadily downhill. Now, has he still gotten really solid reactions from the audience? Of course. Has he still been able to keep himself in the mix when it comes to, the upper mid card? Yes. But I think it has become abundantly clear that this is a guy who has a ceiling, and I don't think we're ever going to see him ever be the WWE champion. I don't think that's in the cards for Mr. Knight. which I don't take any great pleasure in saying that. I think that eventually it's going to get to the point where, and we've seen this in the past with many other superstars, where it's just like, what is the point of even cheering for this guy if we know he's never going to win? And I feel bad for him, but with botches like that we saw tonight, I think that it's kind of clear that he's only going to ever be at a certain level, and that's unfortunate for him because prior to him signing to WWE, his run as Eli Drake in TNA, I thought that he was very successful there, but maybe that's just a case of being a big fish in a smaller pond. And now that he's able to get to the WWE level, where there's more people who are on his level and above, especially when it comes to the in-ring aspect, things have just not. It just hasn't 100% fully come together for Mr. Knight in WWE, and getting to the point to where he is rubbing shoulders with guys like CM Punk or Roman Reigns or Brock Lesnar or any of these guys. And we saw the rumors a couple of weeks ago about him being the guy who is going to wrestle Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania. If that's the creative, that was rumored to be the creative direction a few weeks ago. If that is still the creative direction now, which I think is just an awful idea with the crowd, being pretty vocal about them wanting it to be Obafemi. I think that's a waste of WrestleMania, spot for Brock Lesnar, because it's just like, dude, that would have the possibility of being Brock Lesnar's worst WrestleMania match since his match with Dean Ambrose, the Mox, in Dallas, because just heading into that match, there's no how anybody would even remotely believe that LA Knight would be winning it, and it's just it'd be a waste of time and a waste of a match on the card. But there's really nothing else to say when it comes to Mr. Knight. But the main takeaways, at least for me, is Raquel's a beast. I'm thinking that Randy Orton versus Cody Rhodes is going to be the match that we're getting at WrestleMania when it comes to the WWE title. The WWE fans either didn't know or didn't care or didn't like the fact that we had Danhausen be the reveal. And pretty much, the CM Punk match with Finn Balor, I think the main highlight, at least for me, as an avid NBA fan, was them doing the 90s Bulls type of intro for CM Punk. I thought that was really cool. I thought it was funny how WWE, they acted as if the debut of Collision didn't happen and said this was CM Punk's first match in the United Center. And look, this is just a pet peeve of mine. I know that other people probably don't care, but I get that this is WWE, right? And they have the right to tell whatever narrative that they want to tell, right? But there's a difference between telling a different narrative and just, blatantly saying something that's not true. And I've always had this thing when it's like, when it comes to WWE, it's like, okay, you want to change the narrative on things, great, but just don't question my ball knowledge, man. And when you say things like that, it is a lie, and it's a lie, you're insulting me. The mark, one of the marks. You're insulting me, and you're questioning and disrespecting my ball knowledge. And you don't do that, right? But this is a decent show. I think we've seen better Elimination Chambers in the past. 2.5 stars from the Dave Meltzer star rating when it comes to this card. But guys, please remember to hit that like button and subscribe. I think that Monday Night Raw and the episode of SmackDown that we're getting this week is going to be far more interesting due to the fallout coming out of this show and the card really starting to take shape and form as to what it's going to look like as we get closer to WrestleMania season. But guys, please remember to hit that like button and subscribe. I am Kevin Zwicker. I'm out.